Hey guys, Nick here. Just heads up, there's some mature language in this episode. Wanted to give you a fair warning. Alright, let's get to it. Hey, welcome to Minor Details. I'm Nick.
And I'm Michael.
And we have a very special guest today, Michael DiTullo. He's flown all the way from San Diego to New York. Not for us, for another event, the Core Sam Conference, but we snagged him today. James is actually on vacation, so I'm doing this one solo, and I'm sure that Michael will be more than qualified to fill James's spot for this episode.
I'll pitch in.
And we'll try to add in some comedic relief because we'll miss that from James. But Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I could take a whole hour introing you of all the things you've done, but I just wanted to say that you have over 20 years experience working for some awesome brands: Nike, Jordan, Converse, Frog. You've designed vehicles, and you were this chief design officer of a speaker company, Sound United. You are like very active in the design community. You've done like a ton of talks. You've gone to schools. You are always posting sketches on Instagram. You made a book. I could go on and on.
I like what we do.
You love design, and you actually also just started your own design studio.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot to talk about. I got a lot of questions. Hopefully we'll get to them all. But you guys are in for a treat tonight. So I think maybe we just start off with a little bit of backstory. I kind of want to know how you started, like what made you aware of industrial design?
So, I mean, I came from kind of like a pretty normal middle-class family. There were some creative people in the family. There were a lot of musicians. My one uncle went to art school with my mom's younger brother, and we lived with him and my grandfather for a short period while I was growing up. So like I was learning how to draw in perspective when I was in like the third grade. And so for me, the things that I liked to draw were just what I would call the things of the future. And this would be like a nerdy or super nerdy story, but like when I was a latchkey kid, like a lot of kids in the 80s, and I would come home from school and I would, turn on DuckTales or whatever, and I would go get the Sears catalog. And for those of you that are too young to know what the Sears catalog was, it was basically Amazon, but a book that came once a year. It's this big ass catalog, and I would open it to a random page, and it's like, okay, it was power drills, and then I would try to imagine what the future of power drills would be like and draw that.
This was when you were how old?
I was probably like 11, 12 years old.
And you didn't know what industrial design was?
No fucking clue.
You were just opening up a book and sketching power, like,
and just designing stuff.
Yeah, you were doing it without even knowing what you were doing.
If Instagram had existed, I would have been probably a famous kid, but it didn't exist. So I mean, I was very intuitively doing that. And then when I was 13 years old, my parents asked me, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to draw stuff from the future. And I just thought, like, very naturally, it was like, that had to be someone's job. I had a vague awareness, I think, just, probably through popular culture of what an architect was, right? They draw buildings.
Right.
And I kind of knew what a fashion designer was. They draw clothes. And I was like, there's got to be a person that does all the other things in the world.
Right.
And a few months later, I remember my father was reading the newspaper, and on the cover of the newspaper was an article about Giorgetto Giugiaro, who designed the DeLorean as well as the first Volkswagen Golf. And there was a bunch of things that he had designed. There was a super sports car. There was a tennis racket, a pair of sunglasses, and pasta. And I was like, and he's like, is this the thing you want to do? And he said industrial design. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. So that year for Christmas, And so now I knew what it was called, right? And there was no Google. I couldn't Google it.
Okay.
But I would go to a bookstore and comb through the art and architecture section, and I found a book on industrial design. Now I knew what it was called, right? And there was a book called Design and Rendering Techniques for Industrial Designers by Dick Powell.
Okay.
And in that first chapter 1 of that book was like, here's the stuff you need: markers, T-square, a triangle, a drawing, and I just like made my Christmas list from the book, and that's what I got for Christmas that year.
That's crazy.
So I know I was 14. Now I was like 14 at that point, and
Wow.
so I kind of was very lucky. It's a really unusual story for designers. Either they come to it later in life, or maybe they come to it early in life because they had a parent who's an architect or an engineer. But
Yeah.
I lucked out.
Yeah, we've talked to a few guests on the podcast, and I mean, James and I always are talking to other designers and students. Yeah, it's crazy how not known industrial design is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
I mean, and I think the it's a bad thing, but I think the good thing about it is that those of us who are industrial designers almost always have a great origin story. And so I collect those origin stories.
Right.
I often will ask other designers like what you just asked me,
Right.
because it's usually a good story.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so you started designing when you were like 11, knew what industrial design was at 14, and then you went to study it, I assume.
Yeah, I was in math class in 9th grade in geometry, and like bored out of my freaking mind. Mrs. Jacobus was my teacher. I was sitting in the back of the math class just like furiously drawing something, and I didn't hear Mrs. Jacobus come up kind of around the class. She was lecturing. She comes up kind of behind me, and she slapped her hand down on my desk and ripped the paper out of the my binder, my trapper keeper, and crumpled it up and said, "Come see me after class." And she threw the crumpled up paper in the trash, and all the kids were like, "Ooh, you're in trouble." And I was in trouble, obviously. So I came up to her after class, and she reached into the trash can. She smoothed the paper out, and she wrote at the top, Rhode Island School of Design. And she said, "My brother went to this school for architecture." She's there's no Google at the time. This is 1992.
Okay.
No, 1990. This would have been 1990. She's like, write to them and have them send you a catalog, and never draw in my class again. And I went to school there. So
Okay.
I call these things like moments of kind of optimistic rebellion. Like, I wasn't trying to piss Mrs. Jacobus off, but it worked out for me because it like set my life on course.
It's
right?
funny how she got upset at you, but also she was guiding you in a way.
Right.
Which is awesome.
Well, she had to be upset with me for the class. Right. But,
Yeah. So you went to RISD, and did you have any internships, or what was your time like there?
It was very stressful in that. So I came into school maybe like a little bit more well-read than your average student on what design was, because
Because you've been doing it for like 5 years before, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe like with some skill, and I loved freshman year of school at RISD. It's like a really like rigorous program.
Okay.
They'll like kick your ass.
They're trying to like trim out the slackers.
And it's good. I loved it because I felt like, I was really kind of the first generation in my immediate family to go to college, and so to go to art school was kind of a big deal. Some convincing.
So were your parents upset that you wanted to go to art school? I would say certainly most parents think of their kids going to like engineering, getting a stable job, accounting.
I think I was just like, this is what I'm doing.
Okay.
I was very, like, always been that kind of a person.
Okay.
A little type A kid. So freshman year was great. And the more they kicked my ass, the more I was like, oh yeah, like I'm getting my money's worth. That's how I looked at it. Like the easy teachers, I felt like I'm not getting my money's worth out of this.
Right.
The product I'm buying is like, mold me, right? So the sophomore year was the first year of design studies for industrial design, and there's 4 teachers. 2 were graphic designers, and 2 had just graduated the grad program. And I was like, I don't think these people know what they're doing. And I like, yeah, I just didn't like, I did not respond well.
I'm starting to see a common thread here.
Yeah, I'm kind of a pain in the butt is the common thread. But now, while that was an accurate assessment, it turns out I was only 19 years old, and I didn't respond well to that situation. I just basically stopped coming to class, and then on crit days, I would bring a totally different project, and they would be like, "What the fuck is this?" And I would be like, "This is the project you would have assigned if you knew what the hell you're doing," but you don't.
Oh, wow! All right.
So they put me on academic probation, and they asked me to leave the school.
You had to leave RISD?
No, I didn't. They asked me to.
Oh, okay.
And I was pretty fed up. I flew out to Art Center. They told me, they're like, just go to Art Center. You're like Art Center kid. And I flew out to Art Center, and I mean, I'm from this area, so I was like, man, that's like really far. And LA is like, oh my God, that's like not what I know. And I didn't like, I met with the head of the department at Art Center, who was their transportation program at the time was Ron Hill. And he was like, yeah, you're going to get in. But there was a kind of an attitude there. He's like, yeah, you can be a designer if you go to RISD, but if you want to be a real designer, you'll go here. And to that, I was like, fuck you, I'll be a real designer wherever I go. and I had also just met this girl who I would later become my wife. So so it was a good thing. You know, I didn't leave. I went back to RISD, determined to stay. We worked out a plan that took some convincing. It wasn't smooth at first. It was a lot of yelling matches.
Oh boy!
Involved me like actually crying because I'm like 19 years old and the head of the department is telling me to leave, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just kind of like following my gut for some stupid reason or a good reason, but I didn't know. And then we basically worked out 2 years of somewhat independent studies. So I did a project sponsored by Nike. I did a project sponsored by Nissan. I did a semester at Cleveland Institute of Art where I did a project sponsored by Chrysler. And I spent some time studying in Italy in a program.
Ooh, okay. Study abroad.
So it was it turned out to be a freaking awesome education. Sophomore year was rough, but the rest of it, I ended up graduating with the faculty award. So, however, that plots out.
Okay, well, it definitely turned around then.
Yeah, and I was happy, you know, with myself, I guess, where I ended up in terms of the education I got, and it certainly like benefited me later in life. I feel like the skills. What I got from RISD and why I wanted to stay was I got maybe a little bit of a different way of thinking. I was already kind of like a very commercial designer.
Okay.
I'm not really interested in making like arty things that you only make 5 of and you lose money on.
Right.
I want to make things that like impact people's lives and that they enjoy.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that kind of commercial mindedness, but I think what I got from RISD was maybe a little bit more critical thinking.
Okay, that's cool. And after RISD, I know you've been in the footwear thing for a bit. Mm-hmm. Was that straight after school, or was there in between?
Okay, yeah, there's a story there actually. Okay. So I did the project for Nike, right? It was it finished like a couple of months before I graduated. I actually got to fly out to Nike a couple times. And it was me and 2 classmates got the sponsorship. And John, who was at the conference actually yesterday, I don't know if you met him, John DePonte. And we just had an amazing experience. Like we hadn't, you know, none of us had really been to the West Coast very much. And Nike was awesome. And our kind of executive sponsor at Nike was the design director of footwear at the time, Dave Scanoni, who was an amazing designer. And when I got back from our last presentation, I had an email from Dave and was like, you know what, you did a great job, Michael. A lot of people think you did a great job, and we think you should work here. And my project, I had a 3-shoe collection, and it was like the anti-Nike collection. It was like no logos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was all designed around, so this is 1998.
Okay. And
it was all designed around alternative sports. So it was like a BMX shoe, a skate shoe, and kind of like a trail runner. And it was kind of like somewhat sportswear, somewhat ACG, somewhat Nike skate, but before all that stuff. Okay. And I was an idiot. I was like, thanks, Dave, for your email. I really liked you guys too. But now I'm doing the sponsored project for Nissan, and I have 2 months before I graduate. Can I email you when I graduate? And he emailed me a really nice email back. He's like, yeah, no problem. Let me know. I'm sure he was like, what an idiot. You know, I would have, you know. So I graduate. I do the Nissan project, which also goes pretty well. They didn't offer me a job. So I was like, well, let me go to my plan B. Hey, Dave, how's it going? Like, how's that job still out? Michael, we actually had a terrible quarter, and there's a hiring freeze. And I was like, I don't know, what's a hiring freeze?
Right.
He's like, we can't hire anybody for the rest of the year. I'm like, it's June. I need to like get a job now. I can't wait till January.
Right.
And it actually led to probably some of the worst 6 months of my life. I had moved back home, which was terrible, and I didn't have a job. And I didn't really know how to get a job. Like, Coraflot didn't really exist. It was just a text-only job posting board. It was like Craigslist at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a different world, man. There was no portfolio hosting anywhere. This didn't exist.
Huh.
So I started applying to like some freelance gigs on Coraflot. I at least had a few freelance gigs kind of get me through, and they're on site. And I wasn't getting a lot of positive response on my portfolio. So I just kept working my portfolio like 8 hours a day. So the weeks that I wasn't freelancing, my parents had like a ping pong table in the basement, and I set that up as my studio, and I'd work on my portfolio 8 hours a day. And then Friday I'd put together portfolio books and mail them out.
Were you redoing past projects, or
Yeah.
were you creating new projects?
Both.
Okay.
It was just like, because I could go freelance at a place and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is the level. Just redo the whole project.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then, because that's what I always look at is like, people are like, oh, you shouldn't redo projects because it's not honest to the process. So like, I look at it as like when a student shows me their project, and I'm like, why'd you do this? And they're like, well, I wouldn't do that now. I'm like, why are you showing me that then? Show me what you would do now.
Right.
That's who I'm hiring.
That's true. That's
not
true.
hiring the guy 2 years ago. I don't care.
No, that's good advice.
So anyway, then I finally started getting some callbacks. I remember I got a callback from like Smart Design, Continuum, and this little design firm in Connecticut called Evo. I just started the year before, and I just had a good feeling. I met with the partners. The junior partner was only 8 years older than me, and I just felt like I would have been the fifth hire, and I was like, I'm gonna get a lot of personal attention, and I'm gonna learn a lot.
As opposed to other companies.
Yeah, I'm not just gonna be like one of a
Right.
million fresh grads in that company.
Right.
And so they made me an offer on the spot, and I accepted the offer on the spot. And in a couple of weeks, I was working there, and that was an awesome experience because they were really small. I think there are maybe 15 people, probably bigger now. They have a few locations, but anyway, we were doing work for Hasbro. We were doing work for Bose. We were doing work for like big companies, and a lot of work for Burton. And one night I was there working late. It was like 7 or 8 p.m. and I was the last one in the studio, and a phone rings, and I pick it up. I'm like, hey, this is Michael, Evo Design. And he's like, hey, Michael, this is Dave Scanoni from Nike. I want to do a project with you guys. I was like, oh, hey, Dave, I was that idiot that turned your job down like 2 years ago. He's like, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Oh, that's funny.
Let's do project. And so at that time, Dave was running a group called the Explorer Group, which is kind of like there's the Innovation Kitchen, but then like at the time, it's all different now. But even further out, there was a group called Explorer. And we ended up doing like 5 or 6 projects for them. And they would just be like these random words. Like Dave would be like, footpod, go. And we're like, what does that mean? I don't know. You tell me. And so we were doing, I remember doing these things like, what if the shoe was knit?
Right.
And it was knit, and then there was just rubber on the bottom.
Oh.
And then like that's like would lead to like 15 years of development. What if I was doing a bunch of watches at the time? Timex is a big client, and I was like, what if the bottom of the shoe flexed like a watch band, like a metal links? And they're like, well, we can't do that, but we could put these knives in the mold, and then you get these deep grooves, and then we call it Nike Free.
So you predicted all? Did you design these, or you just
they were concepts? Yeah, like we
conceptually.
Yeah, and
because these are. I mean, you have the Flyknit and these shoes, like the one where it's like the knife in the
That's
mold.
Nike free.
Nike free, right?
Yeah. And so, and then several years. So this is the path, right? You asked me how I started working at Nike.
Right.
So I was at Evo for 4 years, and I wanted to go corporate. So I had like a small consultancy experience, which was amazing. Got to work on everything. Got to be part of pitches. Got to present to clients because in a 5-person consultancy, like everybody's doing everything.
Right.
I knew I wanted to go corporate because I wanted to know what was happening on the other side of the wall. Like why did projects come out like totally mutilated or not at all? And,
Right.
And I wanted to work for I worked for a small consultancy. I want to go work for a big brand. So I didn't want to call up Nike though, because they're a client, right? And I'm like, oh, that doesn't seem very ethically cool. And I was interviewing some other companies. I interviewed at like Adidas and Nike has happened to email me, and I had offers from like 3 or 4 other footwear companies when they emailed me. And so I just told all those other companies like, oh, I'm still interviewing. I need to put a hold on your offers. I flew out to Nike. I interviewed. Nike's like notorious for taking forever to decide to hire somebody. And I was just like, look, I have offers from 3 of your competitors. So you need to decide in 48 hours if you want to hire me. I had offers from, and it was cool because I went into like the Dave Scannoni's office, and there was all my work was still up from 2 years ago.
Whoa.
Like, let's do this one next and this and that and explore this.
Whoa.
And I had offers from 3 different groups at Nike, and sportswear was a new group at the time. So for 30 years, the company had been making shoes only for particular activities. And this new group had formed that was about making shoes for the rest of the day, right? So instead of for the 2 hours that you're running or playing basketball, what are you wearing for the other 14 hours of the day that you're in shoes? And I was like, I want to work in that group and they're like, why? Like, it's not anything yet. I'm like, that's why. Like, that's what's cool about it.
Yeah.
I could help figure out what that is.
Yeah, it's a big opportunity to form that entire brand. Yeah.
I thought I'd be there for like, I'll just go and like learn what's going on the corporate side. I'll learn like about going to factories and making stuff. I'll learn about marketing and how that works. And I was like, I'll be there for like 2, maybe 3 years tops. And I just loved it. I almost thought I would never leave at one point. And I ended up being there for about 8 years.
Wow. Okay. And now I remember, I believe, so I have seen you talk a couple times, and we actually officially met like yesterday at the conference.
We shook hands.
Right. We shook hands for the first time.
Yeah.
We've seen each other in passing before,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember the talk at, I believe, the first Square One conference where, did you talk about how you like walked into a Nike meeting and was like, I want this job, or maybe you were trying to switch over to Jordans?
Yeah.
I want to hear that story because I feel like that was a good story.
So I was in sportswear for like 2 years maybe, and I just was like, I was at Nike for like 1 year, and I went through like an emotional slump, to be honest, because I went from a 5-person firm where like everything I did was like business critical to Nike, where at the time there was 350 designers. Now there's like 900.
What, really?
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah, in all across disciplines, but
Okay.
yes. And so I started to go through a like, what if I didn't come to work today? What if I didn't come to work this month? Would it even matter? Would anybody notice? You know? And so I went through this emotional slump, which led to me kind of reaching out to the VP of design, who was like my boss's boss's boss, and just being like, can I have lunch with you? Like, I'm going through some stuff. Can I have lunch? And he was like, yeah, let's have lunch. And he's like, no staff designer has ever asked me to just have lunch. This is awesome. And he's like, let's have lunch every month. And so he started like just coaching me, mentoring me, like, what's your vision for yourself? Like, where do you want to go? And, you know, I don't really, I hate sports. I not hate them, but like they don't do anything for me.
Okay.
Like watching them.
Okay.
Like I'd rather go for a run or do something, but I can't I don't know.
You don't want to sit back and watch a game of football.
Yeah, I'd be like, I should do stuff.
Right.
That's kind of what I get out of it. But anyway, so, you know, John was like, oh, what does Nike mean to you? Like, why do you want to, why does the brand connect with you? Because it does. And I sat back and I was like, oh, for me, Nike equals sport, but sport equals the celebration of human achievement. Really, that's all any sport is, right? It's celebrating, hey, this team did something really cool, and we celebrate them. And gets next season, everybody gets to start all over again. And so I made a video about that because I can't explain things. I had to like make a visual thing and show that to John, and John was like, let's show that to Wyden Kennedy. And like now I'm in the room with like the ad agency for Nike and like talking about campaigns. And so then I had this thing of like, okay, like if this whole brand is about human achievement, who is the person that represents that? Well, that's Michael Jordan, right?
Right.
And so then I went to John. I was like, I want to go work in Jordan, John. And he was like, you have been here like 18 months, and there are people that have been here 20 years who want to work in Jordan. There's only been 12 designers ever in the history of that brand at that time who've worked in it. He's like, but go talk to Dwayne, who's the design director, and Dwayne Edwards, who founded Pencil Academy, and you see what he says. So I had to talk to Dwayne. Hey, Dwayne, my name's Michael. I know who you are. I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I really want to work for you, and I know you have an open slot because so-and-so just left the group. So, like, give me a shot. And he was like, well, a lot of people want that shot, Michael. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a project. And if you want to work for me, do that project in your own time. I was like, awesome. He's like, really? I'm like, worst thing that comes out of it is I got to design a Jordan. You know, like, so on the weekends, I'm just, working weekends I'm doing my work and then designing this conceptual project for Jordan. And I showed it to Dwayne, and Dwayne was like, I really like it. Let's show it to Mark Parker. So it goes like a quarterly design review at the time that Mark would sit in.
And Mark is
he's now the CEO.
Okay.
At the time, I think he was president. And it was like Mark Parker, Eric Sprunk, and John Hoke, who was the head of design.
Okay. So these are the bigwigs.
Yeah, bigwigs.
Okay.
Yeah. Every designer has to kind of go through this. I think it's once a quarter, or maybe 3 times a year. And so I had presented for Sportswear the day before because it's like a 4-day event. And then the next day I come in with Jordan, and they're like, Michael, what are you doing here? I'm like, I did an extra project for Dwayne. And they're like, really? I was like, why not? Why wouldn't I? He asked me to. And we presented the project. It went well. And Dwayne was like, good job. You got the job.
Wow.
So, and that led to being in Jordan, which was amazing. And what was cool about Jordan was like, it was the only, at the time, business unit integrated group. So at the time, everything was divided by discipline. So all the footwear designers sat together. All the apparel designers sat in a different building. All the footwear developers sat over here. All the footwear product line managers sat over there, which was great because you got this awesome center of excellence around design. Like you could see what all the other designers were doing, but maybe the communication wasn't the best between the business unit components.
Right.
Whereas Jordan, I was sitting next to, I was two or three of us in footwear design, and I was sitting next to 3 apparel designers, and the marketing guys and the engineering guys were all together. And so that was great because I could be like, go to the apparel guys and be like, I want to do some stuff. So like I was doing like little zipper pulls for them and bags, and the brand team was like, hey, every year we redo the Jordan word mark. I was like, I want to do that one year. And they're like, okay, sure. Even nobody turns down free work, right? So
yeah. Michael, I kind of feel like, I imagine you just like walking around Nike, just walking over to everyone's desk and be like, hey, can I just design stuff for you?
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I mean, I was like, I just wanted to, and I had this, before I had worked at Nike, I had designed like 40 watches that went to production, and there was a whole timing group at the time.
40 Nike watches?
No, for Timex at mostly.
Oh,
yeah.
Timex. Okay.
Yeah, and so I was like, I remember I asked my boss, I'm like, hey, where do the watch guys sit? And he's like, oh, they sit in a different building, Ken Griffey, on the 4th floor. So I just walked over there. I'm like, hey, are you the watch guys? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, can I design a watch too? They're like, sure, okay,
That's awesome.
I mean, I think it's like, you'd be surprised like how far enthusiasm will get you in life, Okay. Like a little positive intention, a little enthusiasm, the will to buy someone a coffee.
Right.
Goes a long way.
No, that's so cool.
I feel like, what's the cliche? Like most of it's just showing up or something.
Yeah, like 90% of the work is just showing up.
Yeah.
But that's really crazy that you got first of all, you worked at Nike, and then not even 2 years you got promoted to being in Jordans, which is crazy.
Which is
cool. I don't know.
And I got to work with Michael Jordan. I mean, it was
So you got to shake his hand?
You got to spend a lot of time with him.
That's cool.
Yeah. I remember the first meeting I was ever in with him, my boss was presenting the Jordan 21 that he was the lead on, a few of us had worked on. And Michael just asked like 5 questions, like so fast that like we had not thought of. Like Dwayne had put the emblem of his fraternity on the bottom, on one of the cushioning pods on the bottom. Just it was a cool detail.
Okay.
And Michael was like, "Why'd you put my fraternity symbol on the bottom?" And Dwayne's like, "Hey, not a lot of people know that you were in this fraternity, and we thought it'd be this cool little like wink, wink, nod, nod." And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, did you ever think of the fact that there's 5 black fraternities and we put one of their symbols on here? Now, like the other 4 black fraternities are not going to buy this shoe." And we're like, haven't really thought about that.
Oh.
And he's like, "Isn't our biggest audience like the suburban white kid?" And he doesn't know what that is. They're like, "Yeah, that's true." And he's like, "And I believe you guys are telling me that our biggest growth opportunity is in Asia. So what does this have to do with what's going on in Asia?" And we're like, "Oh, nothing." And he's like, "And did you ever stop to think the fact that you put it in the traction on the bottom, maybe they would interpret it as an insult?"
Yeah.
And we're like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, take it the fuck off the shoe."
Oh, man.
But that's how like he was just like a multi-dimensional thinker.
Right.
And it's so cool. And I remember a few months later, my boss was invited to spend the weekend with Michael. He sponsored this like a motorcycle racing team, like super bike racing team. And there's this race out in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, I think it's called Mid-Ohio Track. It's like 2 hours from Akron or something. Like, there's like nothing around it. And my boss couldn't go. He had a family commitment. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to go, Michael?" I'm like, fucking man. 3 days with Michael Jordan and motorcycles.
People pay like millions of dollars
for
that.
I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to go to that. He's like, "Now remember how Michael was in the meeting." He's like, "Don't kiss his ass. Don't say anything stupid. Like, those are the 2 rules." And I'm like, okay, I could do it. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to at least try to do it. And so I get out to Mid-Ohio Track, and it's pouring rain. Like, I mean, just like that kind of like Midwest where it's just going to rain for days.
Right.
It rained the whole 3 days. And there's only one like VIP box because this is like, it's not a lot going on there. I go into the VIP box. There's kind of like a big round table. And Michael and like, 8 of his like boys, like his oldest friends, are just sitting there with like red Solo cups and like one of those really big bottles of Grey Goose. And it's like maybe 11 in the morning and it's like into the bottle because there's nothing else to do, right? They're just like, we're here and there's nothing going on. And I walk in and I'm carrying this like, I have a prototype laptop bag that I designed, this that has the bottom of the Air Jordan 3 on it. That has it started as a joke where somebody gave me a pair of Mike's shoes that he had actually worn, and it was a Jordan 3. And my buddy was like, "You could put I could put a laptop in those things." And so I just drew it, and the marketing guy took my drawing and showed it to Foot Locker, and they're like, "We'll take 100,000 of those."
Wow.
So I had the very first stitched up test.
Okay.
And I walk in, Mike looks up, and he comes over, and he's like, "Oh, you're Michael, right? You're the new designer." I remember. He's just like, dude, smart. He's just,
Yeah.
I was blown away that he remembered me. And he's like, "Tell me about that bag. I haven't seen that bag." I told him that story. I just told you. And he was like, "I love it. I love it. I love the way creative minds think." He's like, "So I get the first one, everything, right?" I'm like, "Yep, you do."
So did you have to give it to him?
You do. This is a prototype. It's pretty fucked up. Like, let me get you one, like the first real one.
Right.
And he's like, "But I want that one." And I was like, remember my boss said, "Don't kiss up. He doesn't like it when he wants you to treat him as a peer."
Right.
And I was like, "Mike, like, this one's got my stuff in it. It's raining out there.
Yeah.
I'll get you one."
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he's like, "So I can't have the fucking bag that has my fucking name on it." Oh, and I was like, no, I guess not at this point.
Oh my gosh.
I can't capitulate now. And he was just like, "Unbelievable." And he like walks over to the table and I was like, "I fucked up. I messed up already." It's like 30 seconds in. He goes back to the table with his friends. He just tells them the story of what just happened. And I'm, by the way, 10 feet away, just standing there. Right. And then they start dying laughing. And then he's like, "You get up." And he gets a fresh Solo cup and he's like, "Mike, come over here. You're drinking with me this weekend. There's nothing that's going to rain all weekend." And so that whole weekend, all I did was draw shoes and drink with Mike. And I came back. I was like, "Oh, Mike said we could make these shoes."
Wow.
Like, these are approved. So it was amazing.
I feel like
experience.
I love these stories because you're always like rebelling, but you rebel so well that it turns into something great, which is crazy.
I don't mean anything by it. You know, it's like I'm just trying to like, I don't know. It's just like font.
No.
I
love these stories. These are great.
And so I worked with him a bit. I worked with Carmelo a little bit. I worked with Derek Jeter a little bit. And then when I went to Converse, when Nike bought Converse, I was one of the design directors at Converse, and I worked with Dwayne Wade for the short time we had him at Converse. Mm-hmm. So it was cool. I mean, really, like, even though I think that athletes really like that I don't watch sports at all, they thought it was hilarious. And they probably maybe were happy to work with someone that wasn't kissing their butt.
Right.
And I was just trying to figure out, like, what do you need? These guys, like when Michael would play in a pair of sneakers for 2 hours, it was done. The thing was just shredded. And, you know, it's like you're getting to build tools for them. These are like tools for their job. And if you mess up, if the traction's not good enough, if the support's not good enough, they could hurt themselves and it could ruin their careers.
Right.
So they're critical, and like rightfully so.
It is. It's interesting to think of it in that way, because I think a lot of people think about shoe design, you know, when they think about Jordans or Yeezys or any of these, you know, really high-end brands or, you know, popular brands, they think of it as like a marketing, like, oh, every kid's going to want these shoes. But you're thinking of it as these shoes were actually designed for the player themselves and like trying to make it be the best shoe possible.
I mean, I got to work a lot with Tinker, which was awesome. And he's trained as an architect. And so he told me he really approached working with Michael like he was his architect. And he's like, how can I, he's like, build this house for you that's going to work the way you need it. And it just happened to be a shoe.
Right.
And so, and there's two sides to that. Some of that is the story side, and some of that is the function side. And they have to be, to me, they need to be the same thing. And so I would always put little, as I remember I would do these little things in the shoes, like sometimes at the base of the eye row, the throat opening, you'll put a couple perfs there because it actually help the leather flex. And so like I used to love to do things like, I'd put like 2 perfs on the left shoe and 3 perfs on the right shoe. And like John, when I present it to Hoke and to Parker, they'd be like, Michael, you fucked up. They got 2 different numbers of perfs on there. Right. I'm like, no, I didn't. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, what are the numbers of the perfs? They're like, well, 2 and 3. And I was like, what's Michael Jordan's number? Like 23. And I'm like, and like nice. I just love that. Nice. And so John would call them like winks and smiles. And he's like, Michael always puts winks and smiles in his stuff. I love that. So that's cool. That's the story part. Yeah. And some of that's for the player, right? Some of that is for like, you know, like for one of Derek Jeter's shoes that I did, his idol, I remember I was talking to him and I was like, who is your idol when you're coming up? And he was like, I always wanted to be Dave Winfield. And I'll get the numbers wrong because it's been a while. I think Derek Jeter's number was 2 and like Dave Winfield's might have been 41. And so on the side of the shoe, I did 41 perfs, but 2 of the perfs were a bigger size than the rest. Oh. And he was like, why are these 2 perfs bigger than the rest? So I'm like, there's 41 perfs, but the 2 are bigger. And he's like, my number's in Dave Winfield's number. Right. And so it's just, so every time he'd put that on, he'd feel that, right?
Yeah.
Or,
I love those like small details.
My friend Jason did the previous Jeter shoe, and I remember Jeter telling us, like, hey, when you were a kid, like, what would you do when you weren't playing baseball? Because a lot of these guys, it's like, all they do is train when they're kids, right? He's like, well, if I wasn't playing baseball, I was playing Pac-Man. And Jason did the top eye row was a circle with a triangle in it, and he's like, we put the Pac-Man on. You know, it's just like these little things that nobody's going to know that, right? I just like that stuff.
Yeah. No, that's great. Now, I mean, that's a crazy awesome career at these footwear companies, but then you went on to go work at Frog, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean that wasn't an easy jump.
Okay.
You know, I really loved working at Nike. It was awesome. I think I remember John. I got to present to the board once, and when I was at Converse, and we were trying to really rebirth that brand. And I remember John introduced me to the board, and he's like, this is Michael. He's going to retire here. And I was like, wow, like that is like a cool, but also scary. Like I'm at the time I was 30 years old.
Okay.
And I'm like, man, so I'm just going to be here for like 30 more years. And I just always have loved everything. So, you know, I had gotten connected through just some random happenstance with this motorsports engineering group that was developing a car with one of the head finance execs at Apple who loved Porsches, and we were doing this super custom Porsche 356 for him. That project ended up falling through just as soon as we got to like A-class surfacing. But then they connected with the guys at Icon, and they were doing engineering all the chassis and mechanicals for Icon. And Jonathan, who's the founder at Icon, Jonathan Ward, was like, he's a huge watch nerd. And they're like, hey, we got this customer, and like he wants the gauges to look like a Bell & Ross watch, and we don't know what the fuck that is. We're engineers. And they're like, oh, let me, you know what? This one's free, guys. Let me knock this out for you. A 20-minute sketch. And they're like, Jonathan wants to meet you. You need to work on like every project now for him. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I have this beginning of this little freelance business.
Okay.
And I mean, I told John Hoke, my boss at Nike, I'm like, hey, I got this company. They want to work with me. And he's like, I'm like, can I do it? He's like, no. He's like, technically, no. He's like, but I know that if I tell you no, you're just going to do it. So I'm going to tell you yes, and just keep telling me so that I can like be aware of what you're doing.
Right. And you're doing this in the nights and the weekends?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Just like a Saturday here,
right.
Whatever. And then I also was really, you know, controlling your definition of yourself, I think, is the most important thing you can do as a designer. So when I first started working at Nike, I remember I got my business cards, and my first boss was like, here's your business cards, Michael. It's like a proud moment.
Right.
And I opened up the box, and I was like, you know, Michael DiTullo. And I was like, oh, footwear designer. I'm like, oh, no, I can't say that. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm not a footwear designer. I'm a designer at a company that makes shoes.
Yeah.
So I actually had them shred them and reprint my cards that say just designer.
Right.
Because that's to control that definition.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So I was always really interested in CE as well as transportation as well as shoes. So I started doing all these just conceptual smartphone projects. This is like pre-iPhone 1. I actually did a phone called the One that would like, it was just like a convergence concept where it would be the only CPU you would have, and then it would just live stream to like a screen. And that was before all this tech happened, but it would just be like, oh, you just need that one processor. Mm-hmm. And it would be like the screen in your car. And then I would just, you know, I would like do really nice Photoshop renderings and some quick, you know, UI key screens, and then just like email it to like, you know, editor at Gizmodo. And they start publishing them because their blogs need content, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I think 4 or 5 smartphone concepts got published by different blogs.
And these were just sketches, right? Or how?
It wouldn't be CAD.
Okay.
Sometimes it would be sketches. Sometimes it would be like really nice Photoshop Illustrator renders. You know, I could do those in a way that almost looked like CAD.
Right.
I mean, honestly, they'd be the easiest things to CAD.
Yeah.
Usually a lot of unconventional materiality. I did this digital wallet concept that ended up in like Mobile PC Magazine in the print mag, which was cool. I mean, cool for me, not that the thing was cool. And then I think being a director at Nike, I was getting recruiters calling me all the time. And so at the time, I had just completed kind of 2 years at Converse Boston as design director. And if you're kind of like doing pretty good at Nike, they move you around like every couple years. And so John was like, hey, it's time for you to come back to the mothership. You know, we're thinking maybe you should be design director at Jordan, maybe design director at basketball. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Like,
this is a big deal though, right? Like,
it was a big deal.
Right.
I of course, being my cynic, you know, I was like, I know, John, like, I know I could do a good job at those jobs. Like, do you have a job where you're like, boy, Michael could really fuck this up? Like, what's a job that you think is too hard for me? I want that job.
Okay.
I want the job, because I was at that point, I'd been doing shoes for 8 years.
Yeah, you wanted something challenging.
And I was like, I'm starting to feel a little comfortable. And I looked back at my portfolio, and I'd say, like, the shoes I was the most proud of, I had probably done in my first 2 to 3 years. Because I just didn't know the rules.
That's
so
interesting.
I was like, oh, look at these women running for the train in their heels. We should make a shoe that folds up and fits in their purse. And the engineers would be like, this kid is fucking nuts, but let's do it.
Did you do it?
Yeah, I went to production. It was on the cover of Metropolis magazine. I was like, I don't know, cool.
That's cool.
I was like, that's what you're supposed to do, right? But then by the time you do it for 8 years, you're like, oh, you can't do that because there's not enough arch support and blah, blah, blah.
Right,
and
right.
And so you find yourself self-selecting, you're self-eliminating concepts based on what you know to be true, even though it's not the truth. So a recruiter called me, who is one of the best recruiters, and he's one of these guys that I won't say his name because he's one of these guys that keeps a very low profile, and you only know him if you're at. He finds you.
Okay, right.
But he had been calling me for like 5 years for like various different jobs, and finally I was like, Tom, don't call me unless you can get me like a job interview as like creative director of Frog Design. He's like, okay, I'll get that. And 2 weeks later, he's like, can get you on a plane and got you an interview as creative director of Frog Design. I was like, okay. So, and I went in there and I showed, I had all like, the blog concepts. And of course, I had a lot of shoot prototypes. I didn't bring actually a portfolio. I just brought stuff that I had made.
That's fun. To bring the actual physical thing.
Yeah, like a whole table full of them. And then for the blog concepts, I just had some printouts, but no screen. I don't like presentations. I like conversations.
Yeah.
And I just, I interviewed with the team, and I remember one of the other creative directors walks in and he's like, ugh, a shoe guy. And I was like, nope, not a shoe guy. I'm a designer that works at a shoe company, so they make shoes. That shoe company happens to be one of the most recognizable brands in the fucking world,
right? And
making industry-leading products in that category. So if that's not something Frog's in, let me know. I'll put all the shit back in my bag, and we can just save each other's time right now.
Yes,
this interview's over.
I love that.
And the guy was like, well, now I'm super interested.
Right.
And I was like, all right, pick a shoe. I'll tell you the story. And so that's how, turned out to be like a whole day interview. One of the guy that had brought me in, who was the executive creative director, is like, I'm so sorry, I'm distracted with my email. He's like, I'm just getting emails about you all day, so you're gonna leave here with an offer.
Wow. Okay.
And I mean, I was terrified. I was so scared to leave Nike. I had at this company that I really love.
It's a big change too.
Yeah, it's a brand I love. Working for people that appreciate me and understand me, right? Who are like, they understand that I'm this kind of happy, creative troublemaker, right? And I got, John, the head of design at Nike, his advice, and he helped make it easy for me and make the transition.
Okay. Well, that's good. And then were there any interesting, like what was like one of the favorite products that you worked on at Frog? You were overseeing a bit more at that point, right?
Yeah. I think as one of my mentors at Frog told me, who's now passed away, Paul Bradley, who's an amazing designer. He was a creative director at IDEO for like 20 years before becoming executive creative director at Frog. He was actually at IDEO before it was IDEO, when it was 3 firms that merged.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, the stories this guy had of Silicon Valley from...
Oh, man, with Steve Jobs and...
Yeah. Just like... Yeah. Turned down the head of design at Apple job before Steve came back, and I was like, oh boy.
Wow.
Anyway, oops. Great stories, but he always describes it because he knew like me, he was very hands-on, and he was like, you have to find ways to design through people to help them see the solution that you want them to see, and for them to be excited about it. And I was running a lot of big programs. I was doing a lot of projects for Intel, P&G, Honda, Chinese car company called KYOSHY on their launch vehicle, which was a multi-studio project. So like Frog Shanghai was working on all the UI, Frog New York was working on the branding, and Frog SF, my team, did the interior design of the car. And then Italo Design in Italy did the exterior design of the car.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Really cool. So that was a fun program. So going to China a lot, was doing a lot of work with the Seattle office as well. It was good. I mean, did tons of mobile phones. But at the end of the day, like, I felt like I was adding some really good value there, because not a lot of people that worked there at the time had come from a corporate background. So I was really helpful in helping them to be a little more empathetic with our clients.
You can see both sides.
Yeah, because sometimes, like, we would write in our contract, like, oh, okay, we'll have a phase 1 review, and, like, must give feedback within 24 hours. And I'm like, he can't do that. Like, why? It's in the contract. I'm like, yeah, but he's got to show his boss, and his boss is gonna have to show his peers. It's like, it's gonna take time. There's gonna be political things. Maybe we can help him with that. Maybe we can be in that room.
Right.
But we have to know that, like, that person probably just can't have the sole ownership of that. So anyway, and one of our bigger clients in terms of ID client was what would become Sound United. It was a company called DEI Holdings, and I renamed it when I joined, but they recruited me to be chief design officer.
So this was so you left Frog and then you went to Sound United.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to that, Michael, we've talked a lot about your story.
Sorry.
This is the whole reason you're here. No, these are wonderful insights. I think this should be a two-parter.
Okay.
So let's take a quick break. Actually, let's
to be continued.
Yeah, let's take a quick break. And for those of you listening right now, we can plug some of your work. I mean,
sure.
You currently released a book. Where can people find that?
On Amazon.com, small distribution platform.
Okay. We'll talk about the book in length on the next episode, but you can also follow Michael on Instagram at
DiTullo, D2LO.
4 characters. It's the most beautiful screen name I've ever seen, DiTullo. And of course, I'm at Nick P. Baker, and we'll be back soon. All right. Take care, guys.
Peace.